Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and I just watched the fifth episode of season 2 of Lower Decks called An Embarrassment of Dopplers, and I think it was mostly a good episode, very entertaining, as always a lot of references and little details they got right from all the Star Trek universe as always, so the show is really good at that. And the episode begins with the senior crew hosting an alien visitor to the ship who is called a Doppler because his species have the ability to duplicate themselves endlessly whenever they get worried or stressed out. They create a copy of themselves. That is perhaps the silliest part of this episode, which I didn't really like. It wasn't really that funny, and the idea itself is kind of too silly. It doesn't make any sense, the conservation of matter and energy and all of that, which is in clear violation, but of course this is a comedy show, so they can get away with a lot of silly stuff, but still I would have preferred if they had some kind of explanation that makes sense, and also if they had solved the problem in the end by using technobubble, by using science, finding a scientific solution, even if it was just with silly technobubble, if they said something something subspace quantum something, if we block the subspace frequencies that allow him to draw infinite energy from a layer of subspace, from quantum singularities, something something, and they explained it in such a way that would sound as if it has some kind of scientific explanation to all of this. I would have liked it even if it sounded silly. It would have been better than no explanation at all. So this is my least favorite part in the episode. Next, we see Mariner and Boimler arranging crates in some cargo bay, and what comes to mind is how come they have to do such manual labor in a future in which they should have, simple robots or tractor beams or whatever, so why would they need to physically carry heavy boxes around all the time? It doesn't really make sense. Even back in season 1 of TNG, we saw Wesley using some kind of small tractor beam to move things around, so why would people need to physically carry stuff from place to place? Also, shouldn't they have robots? I guess maybe robots all got banned because of the danger of them becoming sentient or whatever. That would make sense. A peanut hamper from the previous season comes to mind. But why not use tractor beams or just a transporter beam to move things around? So it doesn't make any sense. Then we see Tandy and Rutherford building a miniature Cerritos, and that part was kind of cute. They had all the little details right, even the inside of the ship, and the model actually has the ability to do everything, like shoot phasers, and it has a warp core and everything. So that part of the episode I thought was cute. I only wish they would have used that ship somehow to solve the problem in the episode. Like, they did use the warp core from inside it to get out of a dangerous situation, but that was it. I wish it would have been used for something more epic in the end, so that was a little bit of a missed opportunity, I think, but overall this was a cute little subplot. And my personal favorite part of the episode was all the stuff inside that starbase. That's something I always wanted to see in Star Trek. I remember when I was a kid and I saw those jellyfish looking starbases with what looked like a city on the top of it. I always wanted to see more of those bases. I wanted to see the inside of them, because they looked so big, they looked like 100 times bigger than the Enterprise, and so I always kind of wanted to see what was in there. Like, it must have all kinds of cool stuff inside of it. So this episode showed us a lot of the insides of that starbase, and it was all spacious and huge on the inside. So that's the kind of stuff I always wanted to see in Star Trek. And because it's a cartoon, they can actually do it without having to build actual sets and so on. So this was a very good use of the fact that this is a cartoon in which they can show us that, and it had an insane amount of details inside the starbase. I'm going to go over some of it, and it was really fun to spot all of that and all the various Star Trek species we saw in the various shows. What bugs me a little bit is that a few episodes in a row now they keep showing us Federation planets and now a Federation starbase, and yet it all seems kind of lawless. It seems as if there are a bunch of aliens doing whatever they want, including illegal weapons trading and a lot of criminal activity, and it's all under the nose of Starfleet, so that kind of bugs me a little bit. It makes Starfleet look kind of pathetic, and Mariner herself in this episode basically gets in trouble as always, and she runs away from the police of the starbase, and she causes a huge amount of mess, almost kills a bunch of people, and there's no repercussions, no punishment for her for this behavior. So this is a little bit of a problem, I think. And what kind of message does this show to kids and all of that she can behave whatever she wants to do with no repercussions, no punishment, even though they show us that she almost killed a bunch of people during the chase scene and all of that, and yet it's shown as if it's fun and it's okay to do that, and there's no lesson to any of this. And so this is a little bit of a problem with the show in general, I think. But I did enjoy it visually. I love to see the inside of the Starbase. And another thing that bugged me a little bit is that Starfleet is shown to be a little bit snobbish and elitist and all of that, because they keep trying to get into that party and only the important ships crews get invited and the Cerritos are not allowed in and all of that. So it makes Starfleet look kind of snobbish, and I don't think I could ever imagine the Starfleet that we saw back in TNG would behave that way. Like, it doesn't really fit what we saw and heard in those older shows. And so according to this show, Starfleet is a little bit snobbish and all of that, and so I'm not sure I like that. And also when we see the cops inside the Starbase and they're unable to do anything, they seem kind of pathetic. They're chasing them around on these four-wheeled vehicles, and so I keep wondering, where is the Starbase security? Don't they have any abilities more advanced than that? Where are the sensors? Where are the transporters and all of that? So the best they can do is chase them around on this vehicle, which at least it looks kind of futuristic. The wheels themselves, they are empty on the inside, and so it reminds me of that bike that Kirk used in the new movies. He also had those similar kind of wheels. So at least it looked a little bit futuristic. Still, I kept wondering, why don't they use hovercraft? They do have anti-gravity technology and all of that, so why do they even use wheels? But I guess maybe we can say that hover technology can be easily disrupted, and so actual physical wheels are more reliable. That could be a neat explanation. So again, I wish it would have actually been explained in some point. But anyway, Starfleet security inside the Starbase look kind of incompetent, and they kind of look like Judge Dredd kind of outfits, which is funny, I guess. But once again, Mariner escapes justice and doesn't get punished for anything she does, as always. So that's a little bit annoying. So let me now talk about the things I actually loved in the episode. I love the attention to detail, all the different starships on the outside and the inside of the Starbase. The promenade also looks really good, I think. The different aliens, Klingons who look like actual Klingons. And then we see this guy who is from a species, I forgot its name, but they come from a planet that was conquered 20 times because they're kind of pacifists, they're cowardly, so they never resisted any occupation of their planet. And yet this guy doesn't really seem that cowardly. I guess in the very end of the episode he was afraid a little bit when Mariner wasn't caught by the police, so he was scared a little bit, but other than that, we didn't really see that feature of his species being cowardly that much. And I love this room they're in because once again it's filled with a whole bunch of little details from all the Star Trek shows. We see all kinds of old technology, old replicators, TOS era devices and outfits, but what I loved most in this shot is the most important device in the universe, the dual lights without function that we saw in a whole bunch of different science fiction movies. I made a whole compilation about this device, so I loved seeing it here, even though it's kind of hidden behind that screen, but I can tell that it's it. So I love that Easter egg most of all. So anyway, this alien asks them to move some crates around just like they did in the start of the episode, and it's full of little datas for some reason, and Boimler asks is there a lore in there and all of that, so that was funny. And of course it turns out later that it also has illegal weapons hidden underneath all of that, which they don't know about. That's why they get in trouble with the authorities. And we see a Boolean barber shop, just like Mott's shop on the Enterprise. It's kind of funny, why did Booleans become obsessed with giving haircuts when they themselves don't have hair? So that's kind of funny. And we see someone who looks like Morn, and then we see a Benzite with a breathing apparatus. And then we see someone who is inside the same kind of wheelchair as we saw Pike in the original series. And the guy inside the chair looks remarkably similar to Alex Kurtzman, and he kind of slowly moves around in the chair and he seems kind of brain dead, so I think this might be a deliberate poke at Alex Kurtzman. I don't think this is a coincidence. I wonder if he approved this or not. And now I think back of all the previous times that his name appeared in the credits at exact places that seemed to kind of poke fun at him were probably not a coincidence either. One time his name appeared over some space garbage, another time it appeared right under Mariner when she was talking about someone who is super boring, and she kind of pointed down and then his name appeared. So now I keep wondering if all those pokes were deliberate. This one is obviously a sort of cameo of him, so I wonder if he approved this or not. And then we see the fish people from TNG's Manhunt episode, probably the funniest species I ever saw in Star Trek. That scene of them eating fish out of a barrel, I think, is one of the funniest scenes of all of Star Trek. So I really enjoy seeing them again. And Boimler sees them and he shouts, "Fish people," and then they hear it and they seem to be insulted by that and they say, "We are not people." That's what he was insulted by, not being called a fish. He was insulted by being called people. So that I think was funny, even though I wish they would have said their one and only line. If that guy simply said food, I think it would have been funnier because, back in TNG in that episode, their only line of dialogue was simply food. They just kept saying food, 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 and that's their only line. So if that guy simply said food, I would have cracked up more probably. But still, it was nice to see them again. Another funny moment was when they passed through that Vulcan ship and there were Vulcans at the front of the ship and those cars moved behind them, but they have zero reaction. They're completely passive to it, and just one of them says "fascinating" in a calm voice, and that's it. That's their only reaction. So I thought that was also a brilliant timing of this joke. This was perfect. And then we see this forest inside the station, which is also a very nice idea, and I guess the walls are holographic. And we see these humanoid bird creatures, which I think we saw in the old animated Star Trek show, so this was also a nice reference. And we see some two-headed birds, and then Mariner almost kills a bunch of people and animals and just barely avoids it. So this is very irresponsible, I think, and I think she should have been punished for it somehow, and yet she wasn't. And then when they drowned in the lake, then all those Data dolls float up, and I thought it was funny because it reminded me of that scene in Insurrection when Data floats up out of the lake because he has some kind of flotation device, so it kind of reminded me of that. And then they finally get to the Starfleet party and we see Captain Shelby and we see some alien officer, and I think that design was originally supposed to be the look of Saru from Star Trek Discovery. I think I saw some behind the scenes stuff in which that was supposed to be his costume and then they changed it, so it's nice to see it referenced here. I guess maybe one day we will see that alien later on, since they do have that costume and all of that, so maybe they will use it at some point, so it was nice to see it here as well, even though the show is mostly kind of ignoring the Discovery era and not doing a lot of references to it. Most of it is from TNG, Deep Space Nine and Voyager and TOS, but not so much Discovery. But still, the design itself I think is actually kind of cool, so I wouldn't mind to see it again. And we see some guy whose number one is a little guy on his shoulder, so that's kind of funny, I guess. Again, one of the things that you can do in a cartoon, which you wouldn't be able to really do in a live action show and be taken seriously, so why not make silly stuff like that? We also see a Gorn serving some food, which is kind of funny. And then we see this bar, which has an insane amount of references from all the Star Trek shows. We see someone who looks like Morn being drunk in the background. We see a Bajoran sail ship. We see a bunch of aliens from the various Star Trek shows. We see a small model of the Guardian of Forever. We see a bunch of aliens from TOS and TAS, the original animated show. The half-white, half-black aliens from TOS. We see that spacesuit from TOS, which is funny. We even see that alien that often appeared in the end of the episodes, which I don't think was ever in an actual episode. Maybe once, I think, when some guy was pretending to be a different type of alien, and I remember that image was in the ending of a lot of episodes. We also see a picture of what looks like Morn on the wall drinking, so I guess that species of Morns really love drinking. They really love to be in bars, and that's why all the bars love them, and that's why there's even a picture of one of them on the wall, so that's kind of funny. Then we see that Kirk and Spock actually visited this bar once, and they carved their names on the bar, which is kind of ridiculous. Like, I can't imagine Kirk and Spock doing that. And we see a model of the Phoenix from First Contact, and we see the Doomsday Machine hanging at the top of the bar. And then back in the Starfleet part, we actually see Okana from the episode The Outrageous Okana, and he seems to be the DJ in the party, so that's kind of fun. I never imagined I will ever see him again. And then the Cerritos crew get annoyed that they are not invited to the party, so they beam that guy who keeps duplicating into that party, and then he ruins the party basically, so it is kind of funny, but still kind of irresponsible behavior, and so it's kind of strange that there are no repercussions of such a thing. I guess this was a callback to that episode with the Tribbles back in TOS when they beamed the Tribbles to the Klingon ship to get back at the Klingons, but you know, the Klingons were the enemy, they were the villains of that show, and yet here is Starfleet itself, the higher ranks of Starfleet supposed to be the villains because they're such snobbish bad guys that you should ruin their party. So this was a little bit iffy, I think. And then they all go and hang out in that bar, and they're now wanting to build a model of Deep Space Nine. And we see Morn sleeping in the background, being drunk as always. And that's the end of the episode. So overall, I enjoyed the episode. A lot of things in it I liked, a few things I didn't like, as I explained. But overall, I do enjoy the show, and I especially love the attention to detail, so many fun stuff to recognize. And another thing I almost forgot to mention is that when they first arrived on the Starbase, Mariner seems to know her way around, and then she says that she used to live there, and then Boimler says, of course you did, because it's kind of become a running joke that Mariner seems to know everyone in Starfleet, and she used to live on a lot of different ships, so she knows all the ships and all of that. And you know, she even knew Riker somehow, and she said that Riker used to be her mentor, which doesn't really make sense unless she actually lived on the Enterprise D at some point, and so maybe she was actually one of the kids of the Enterprise. And someone in my comments once told me to check the episode from season 1 of TNG when all the kids got kidnapped. There was a scene showing the kids getting beamed out of school, and one of the kids there looked kind of similar to Mariner. She had the same haircut. So I immediately made a video about that on my other channel, showing all those clips and implying that maybe that is Mariner when she was younger, that maybe she actually grew up on the Enterprise D, and that would explain how she knows so much about all their adventures and all of that, even though many of them should really be classified if you think about it, and yet she seems to know all about it. So that would only make sense if she actually grew up on the Enterprise, and that would explain how she knew Riker. And you know, back in TNG we always saw that Riker was really friendly with all the kids on the ship, that he was kind of tutoring some of them and all of that. So it would actually make sense if he knew her on the ship. Maybe her mom was an officer on the ship before she was a captain, so it would make sense how Riker knew her and how she knows all the crew of the Enterprise and all the stuff they've been through. And age-wise, it would fit that she was a kid back on the Enterprise, and since the Enterprise went through a lot of crazy stuff, maybe that would explain some aspects of her character being as crazy as she is and all of that. Yet none of this was directly mentioned on the show, but I think it would fit continuity kind of nicely, so I wish they would actually mention that in the future. And I made a video about this specific theory on my other channel, so I will link it in the end. So check it out if you didn't see it yet. Make sure you're subscribed to all my channels. Click the notification bell to see updates of new videos. Let me know what you think in the comments below and we can discuss it, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.